Thank you. Police-involved shootings, protests shutting down major roadways, a bait truck set up to catch would-be Englewood thieves. As we approach the 3-year anniversary of the Laquan McDonald shooting video's release, there remains a strong sense of distrust between Chicago police and some of the communities they serve. How does a city repair this relationship when it's compounded by persistent violence, racial tension, and a so-called code of silence, both on the streets and in police stations? Joining us to provide their perspectives are Glenn Brooks, the Chicago Police Department's Director of Public Engagement; Mike Brown, a former South Suburban police officer and the owner of a security and firearms training agency; JEDIDIAH Brown, no relation, an activist and community organizer who's been on the front lines of recent protests; and Diane Latiker, founder of the nonprofit Kids Off the Block, which provides a safe place for at-risk youth on the South Side, and also provides learning and mentoring at her center. We thank all of you for being on Chicago Tonight. Last week, I don't know if you saw it because I know you don't watch every minute of this broadcast, I interviewed 3 African-American community activists who seemed to suggest there was an almost unbridgeable gap between Chicago police and the communities they serve. And I'd like to go just one by one with you and ask your thoughts on that. Are they right?
Absolutely not. And here's why. We will continue to deliberately work to build a bridge, to work for the public safety, to work for the safety of every neighborhood in this city. And we have. The city has gone through a number of, whether it be protests, whether it be violence, we have been making some progress. That's not to say in any way, shape, or form there's not a long way to go. But there are mechanisms in place that haven't been in place before. We have not had a consent decree before. We have not invited people to have comments on our use of force. We are looking for number one.
We are yet to have a consent decree formally, though, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And as a matter of fact, it's right now, it's for public comment to add their voices to it.
Okay. But you see some reason for optimism. Mr. Brown, do you?
I do, and the conversation has to be, what, if anything, can the community do as well to contribute to the high level of success rate in solving these homicides? That's a part of the problem that's not being addressed just yet. And I understand it's out of fear of retaliation or things of that nature, but having been a homicide detective myself, I can't solve a crime unless I have some type of evidence or any community participation.
Mr. Brown?
No, I'm actually going to agree with the community voices. Common sense has been calling the Chicago police for 7 years now, and they just won't answer the phone. They've not been good partners. And I don't think that that's going to change until we get a new mayor. It's not going to happen under this administration. And I believe Eddie Johnson needs to remember how he first started, because he's changing his course, and it's not getting better.
Ms. Latiker?
I believe that it has to be. It has to get, we have to come together.
But do you think right now that gap is too wide apart?
Well, there's the gap there because everybody's saying it's a gap, instead of trying to fix whatever it is that's keeping us apart. First of all, the police department has a job to do. But what they should do is remember that we as a community are their partners. And more should be invested into the community so they can help with whatever the violence is doing to our communities.
And you feel it is not?
Well, they're not, because they're law enforcement. But they don't realize that the reason that they can solve murders or they can do things in our communities because of the people that live there. And they should be respected for that.
The argument is also, if I hear Mr. Brown correctly, that the community needs to come closer to the police.
I disagree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not on the community to do anything as far as law enforcement is concerned. It's on law enforcement to include the community, because it's people like myself who risk our lives, who come out of our houses to help the police in whatever's going on in our community. And we should have a voice in that.
The two things seem to have exacerbated some of the problems in the last couple of weeks. Mary Wisniewski of the Chicago Tribune just reported that bike riders, African-American bike riders, even though they're about the same percentage as Latino bike riders and white bike riders, get an undue percentage of the tickets, and the reader seemed to reinforce that, saying you could get 80 times more likely to be ticketed on the South Side than in Lincoln Park. Is there Is there profiling going on along those
No,
lines?
and, you know, and we've met with Mary, and we met with a number of the bicycle advocacy community. One of the issues is traffic enforcement and where we do traffic enforcement. The fact is, and when we have communities experiencing levels of violence, we do increase traffic enforcement. Part of that includes bicycles. So it isn't a matter of fact that we are targeting people of color for bicycles. We're trying to do everything humanly possible to curtail the violence. And we know that there are a number of shootings that are directly tied to vehicles and bicycles. Even this weekend, we had someone who was shot that was on a bicycle, and we had the offenders were reported to us leaving on bicycles. So this isn't a matter of targeting bicycles, this is a matter of targeting violence.
Then there's the question of the bait trucks. I don't know who named them. Do you know, does anyone know who called them bait trucks initially?
That's what they're typically called throughout law enforcement circles, because that's the intent, is to put something out there that will cause people to come toward the truck that makes it
So you put a bunch
enticing.
of bicycles in a truck, you put a bunch of Nike sneakers in a truck, but for the communities that are already wrought with violence, it feels to them like entrapment, does it not? And is it not?
Well, sometimes people don't understand the definition of entrapment. Entrapment by law is pretty much enticing someone who does not already have the propensity to commit this action to do something, and then when they commit that action, then you arrest them for that. That's the definition of entrapment. However, it's just like if I were on a buy bus where I'm an undercover detective selling narcotics and someone has a propensity to already want to purchase narcotics, I'm just giving them what they already want, and so that's not entrapment. And so
Does the community
The whole
hear that?
community should not be. I'm sorry. I just do not agree. You put a truck in somewhere with sneakers in it with a bunch of kids for a whole community, and say that they have the propensity to steal the shoes, so you put it there so because you know they want them. Something's wrong with that picture.
And propensity is not in the definition.
Something is wrong with that
It is the act
picture.
of luring a citizen into committing a crime with the intent to prosecute them. It's not speaking about their background.
Yeah, what's the end result?
The
That's right.
environment. That is entrapment.
That's right.
So, Mr. Brooks, going back to this feeling of an unbridgeable gap, the bait trucks and the bike arrests, have they eroded whatever trust you have begun to build in the community?
You know, this is going to be a deliberate, consistent process of reaching out to the community and, number one, giving the community the information of what we're doing and why we're doing it. You know, the fact of the matter is that we run a number of operations, whether it be vice and prostitution, whether it be narcotics, or whether it be operations concerning theft. We're looking to prevent crime. We are looking at situations where we do have a pattern. This is not something that we're going out to entice people. So I don't think it's necessarily eroding trust. It gives us the opportunity to inform the community what we're attempting to do. And a lot of times we're being asked to do something about these situations.
So, Mr. Brown, there is now the discussion of yet another protest to shut down O'Hare. Does it do that much good?
I believe that the city needs to remain uncomfortable, and those major arteries and services must remain interrupted for this administration to hear or at least conversate with the voices of the community. And there's this presentation that they're saying we keep on doing this, but when you take $60 million more of police services and saturate it into a already underserved community, what you're going to see is, yeah, we're going to say crime is down, but what about the arrest that destabilizes families, and what about the oppression that was over the neighborhood, people not being able to enjoy where they live, feeling like visitors? You know, this administration is not intentionally being a partner, so these things need to be continuously shut down until they understand that they hear the voices of the people, and they're not doing it.
You agree?
To a certain extent. Well, first of all, I have to say, the police department created a program called Bridging the Divide. I love it. I love it. It brought officers together, black, white, Hispanic, and young people, in my house, so I know how it worked. It was great. They are trying to bridge, and I know my relationship with the Chicago Police Department. Now, those things that are happening in between that, even a person like myself who loves what they're doing in that area can't go along with targeting our communities, cops coming through our communities, and literally bothering residents because they don't know anything about us. They're rookie cops.
So what's the solution on that?
So start putting the community at the table. And I know that might be asking for much, but to hear me sit at a table and for 10 minutes to say, could you please do this in my community because this is what's best for it, because I live there. So give
You've been at
communities
the table. Who's not at the table?
You know, here's the fact, is that we have to set that table and consistently and constantly reach out to the community.
Are you doing a good enough job?
Yes.
You know,
There you
we can do a better job. And let me just be very clear about this, and the superintendent, every day, when I say every day, he's saying, how are we going to get better? So yes, we are getting better at it, but we have a long ways to go, but we are not stopping. One of the things that we are transforming into is ensuring community policing is a permanent part of it. That's a major transformation.
How do the police feel about that?
I still will say that, you know, I do agree that the police and the community need to bridge the gap, but as a line officer, as a detective, I'm looking at it from the perspective of having to console this mother who lost her child and then having to go and follow the leads. And when I knock on a door and I ask the question, well, do you know? Other people are telling me you know, but you're not giving me that information that will help me. And so how am I supposed to bring some kind of resolution to this homicide, to bring this person to justice, but you don't want to let that person, you don't want to tell them that person because of a fear that you're going to lose your life?
So do beat officers feel there's an unbridgeable gap?
Well, I can say that there are some that they're feeling there might be a non-bridgeable gap. I can't speak for the whole of them.
Mr. Brown, this O'Hare protest, the Wrigley protest didn't really pan out as a major protest, right? Why will O'Hare be any different?
Well, I can't speak specifically to the O'Hare protest because I'm not an organizer of that. But what I will say for this panel is we stop talking police and community and just all start talking black. When you see police officers continually pulling your residents out of their cars and spreading them out all alongside your neighborhood streets, they're not walking in the neighborhood, they're driving past saying obscene things and not even, you know, if you go on the north side, you'll see greetings. When the police department, again, is investing more money into locking people up instead of building community and actually being a larger partner, you will continue to see O'Hare and the Kennedy and the Dan Ryan. People are going to call for those things. I have not called for a major shutdown yet. I just support them because I believe that they need to be done.
Mr. Brooks, are there enough black officers?
You know,
No.
number one, we are very aggressively, and as we speak this very moment, recruiting officers from every neighborhood in
You
the
agree with
city.
that, Ms. Latimer? Yes.
yeah.
They are
You do not agree?
I'm agreeing with the
I
recruitment.
will not allow them
Well,
to
let's
do
just
that
do this
twice.
one at a time.
I won't allow them to do that twice because I work very hard with the Chicago police to encourage more black people to apply. And they were not able to get, a lot of them haven't even gotten a response from the Chicago police after they paid their money and filled out the application. When they say recruit, they're telling people to come and fill out those applications. Those tests are designed and the way they saturate our communities with police officers are designed so black and brown applicants don't qualify. They don't get the job.
Mr. Brown, do you agree that there aren't enough black officers?
I definitely agree that there are not enough black
Do
officers.
you think there's a
but-
concerted effort to keep it low?
Well, the thing, I don't know if it's a concerted effort, but I will say from the perspective of my students that come into my academy, because a few of them aspire to be police officers, there's a problem that, you know, when you have a negative relationship within the community, that there's a repulsion, if you will, to desire to be a part of that very change that they want.
Mr. Brooks, the last word on this?
So I just want to point out, in the last year, not only have we increased our community policing effort, but we also have increased our effort to get people through this process. And that has been a huge movement forward. We are looking for new officers. And if there's anybody who wants to apply, you can go to www.chicagopolice.org and apply today.
There go common sense calling in the police department again.
So we're going to continue this discussion as we have last week and the week before and in the weeks to come. Glenn Brooks, Mike Brown, JEDIDIAH Brown, Diane Latiger, thank you for spending this time with us. There's much more in Chicago tonight. Stay with us. And yes, that was a telephone you heard that just fired off, but we turned it off.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the City Club of Chicago.